Ladies and gentlemen, depending on where you are in the world, good day, good evening, or good morning to you, and welcome to this panel on civil society and youth leadership. I'm sure we will enjoy a productive and insightful discussion today. And this discussion is part of a much wider World Academy-led exercise in soul-searching on the issue of global leadership. We've come together to reflect more specifically here on the best strategies available to civil society actors today. And we ask ourselves, how can civil society and youth lead the way to a transformation of our societies and economies to become more inclusive, peaceful, and above all, sustainable? Now, of course, civil society actors are very diverse culturally and also thematically in what they are focusing on. And in the short planning window that we had available, we tried our best to reflect some of that diversity among our panelists. But there is room for improvement in future gatherings. So please step forward and join the civil society working group and help us prepare for the main event, which is the Congress in Geneva this October at the United Nations. Please also feel free to promote thoughtfully our network among any other important potential contributors or stakeholders you may know. Now, our discussion today responds to a question of vast importance. How can civil society and youth actors bring about the necessary change to secure a positive future for all humanity and for all life on this planet? Like all other sectors and structures, civil society is now being put to the test. We suddenly find ourselves in the midst of an inadvertent adventure. The door, it seems, is shut behind us. The path ahead is still dark. New strategies and much courage will be needed to meet the challenge we ourselves have created. Where we each may lack confidence, we can find confidence in one another's different capabilities and also in the multitude of people within civil society at large who share our aspirations and desire for positive change. Before we begin, just two housekeeping matters. First of all, I would like to stay in touch with participants in this panel. And if you agree, please provide some contact details by clicking on the link for the participant list that you will find at the very beginning of the chat history. So just click it, it's a Google Doc, and you put down your information. There's a data security statement at the top. Second, we have a fairly tight schedule in this first session, and I ask panelists to please keep their answers quite short, that is somewhat under 2 minutes for each question. It can be a little bit shorter sometimes. There are some questions you may have more to say on than others, so we can be flexible in that way. But we want to make sure we have some discussion at the end so that all the participants who are not visible on the screen will have an opportunity also to ask some questions. Please, everyone, submit your questions only through the Q&A function, which is at the bottom of your screen, and do not use the chat. And I also should say that we have a second session at 1 p.m. today. It will be slightly longer, and that will allow us to have more time for questions from the floor. I also would like to now introduce to you my co-chair of the Civil Society and Youth Working Group, Obiora Eke, who's the director of Globe Ethics in Geneva. Obiora, would you like to say a few words?
Thank you very much, Thomas. It is a tremendous privilege all of us have to be part of transforming our world. We do know that we need change, and change is a permanent factor in human societies. Human beings can change either way, for good or for better. What is the possibility for change, which civil society actors and youth? And when we look at youth, most of them are in higher education institutions. Many of them are in businesses and skills and trade. youth are the potential. They make the largest population of the world. How come it that in the 21st century, the youth and civil society organizations are not powering and engineering the world towards the world of our dreams? This is a panel with the World Academy of Science and Arts and all of you gathered around the world, where even from my own view, from globeethics.net in Geneva, we try to bring value to this topic. I look forward to a rich conversation and thank all those who are panelists.
Thank you very much, Obiora. And your very, very true words. We really need to fire up, and that's what we're here for. And we want to be very practical. This is about strategies, not about complaining about all the problems there are and all the obstacles, because we know quite a lot about that already. We want to focus on the positive, on strategies, on being smart and getting organized within this sector. That's what it's about. And Obiora is also one of the panelists. And let me introduce the other panelists. First, Associate Professor Mariana Todorova, who is a World Academy Fellow and also leads the Bulgarian Academy of Sciences and Millennium Project in Bulgaria. Dr. Ash Bashari from the Protect Our Planet movement or POP movement in New York. And Ms. Hongmei Lee, a student leader from Sky Campus Happiness Program, who's also engaged at MGCY. Now, the other speaker who I believe has not turned up yet is Dr. David Harris, who was the principal investigator of the Security and Sustainability Guide that the World Academy initiated, and also engaged at Canadian Parkwatch on security issues. Hopefully David will still join us. Okay.
I'm here.
Oh, you're here. Fantastic, David. Excellent. That's very good.
A little early, but I'm here.
Okay, that's fine. Yes, it's very early where you are. You had to get up early. Thank you. All right. Now, what the format is that there will be 5 questions to each of the speakers. Let me begin then. The first question is that the 12 strategies, and I ask the organizers please to put them on the screen. We had, of course, in this working group, this has been going for some months, and we came up with a list of 12 strategies for enhancing CSO or civil society organization capabilities. And before we kind of move on from there, I'd like to sort of ask you all to reflect on these 12 strategies and tell us which ones do you see as the most important and promising and why, and how do you think they could be optimized? Perhaps we'll start with Mariana. Would you like to begin?
Thank you, Thomas. It's a great honor for me to be here with you and to share my ideas about these 12 strategies. Actually, I'm quite involved in the first strategy because it somehow embodies the story of my life until now, because, you know, I'm former member of parliament in Bulgaria and I'm futurist. And when I was involved in politics, I tried to make some changes in election legislation and to lower the threshold for referenda conducting, like in Switzerland. But unfortunately, I didn't succeed. And when I quitted the politics, I decided to unite my futuristic expertise and my political experience and gather a small team. And together we elaborated a blockchain-based platform for decision-making, consensus building, and discussing. It could also serve as a poll of opinion, real-time discussion, and referenda in small communities or huge communities. So if you allow me, I will show you how it looks like and how it's possible to work among civil society organizations, social movements, because you know, each huge change until now in the each industrial revolutions starts with some new invention, from wood, stone, bronze, steam, electricity. And I believe if we go digitized and if we could use technology appropriately, we could make some huge changes. So now I will share my screen, but I have to be allowed to do that.
Yes, yes, I'm sure.
Would somebody from the support group help me, because
You are given permission, you'll be able to share now.
yeah, if you just press share screen at the bottom of your screen, there's a button with an arrow.
okay. Yes, just a minute, because there is some problem.
Yeah, we can see your screen, but it's a text.
No.
Just bring up whichever document you want to show.
Yes, do you see now?
Okay, that's it. Yeah.
This is how the platform looks like. Imagine that you are part of a civil society movement or civil society organization, and you want to create a digital twin of your organization, of your movement, because you want to maintain the presence of all members, hundreds of thousands at real time, 24 hours, 7 days per week. And you could maintain the interest and the capacity and the energy of this movement, because you could gather 500,000 people at the same time, at the same day. And you have a question to discuss. For example, how to empower young people in this green economy, in the green economy participation. And what is interesting in this platform is that it introduces liquid democracy or delegative democracy as a service. What is liquid democracy? I guess most of you know. You have the chance to vote directly for a certain question, but if you don't feel yourself competent enough, you could delegate your voting right to an acknowledged person just for a certain case. So here you have vote info. If you are opinion leader or if you want to be an influencer, you could accept delegation from other people. This is a sign that you are ready to bear responsibility to represent somebody else in this specific voting. And this is quite interesting for political parties or social movements, because this is a way for a certain person to become a leader or influencer when he manage to succeed and to gather more delegations. But if somebody wants to delegate, to vote directly, he could exercise his vote directly. And if somebody wants to delegate votes to another person, this is a way to choose among people in the platform. Why I'm quite proud with this product, because just a year ago it was just an idea, and for this year we managed to organize it and to make it software as a service and liquid democracy as a service based on a distributed ledger technology, which is quite close to blockchain technology. And the specific issue of this technology is that nobody can interrupt in the process. Even the administrator of the process could not change the data. So each participant in the process could be sure that nobody could compromise the data. And it's quite important when we conduct referendums, real-time discussions, consensus buildings. So I believe that this platform could be a digital twin of our future organizations like United Nations, World Health Organization, social movements, political movements, and other structures. And I'm quite curious to go to pilot project with this platform.
Okay. Thank you, Mariana. I think we must move on to the other speakers. That was quite a long, I know it's important to you, and I think it's very valuable because after all, if you think of the French Revolution, it was all about finding new ways for people to make decisions together. And we need to make progress on that, at that frontier. We need to find better, more trusted, more reliable, more inclusive ways of making decisions. And that will be useful for any organization. People will feel they own it. They feel more ownership and more a sense of being really a part of it and having control over the direction together with others. Okay, so that's great. Can we move on now maybe to Obiora? What do you think about the 12 strategies? Any ones that stand out or that you would?
I would like to say thank you very much, Thomas. The 12 strategies have been developed after extensive consultations with stakeholders. And in summary, they start from what Mariana has tried to put across, the entire internal democracy process through, for example, partnership building and bridging gaps between the global and global goals and local context, including CSO support to local CSOs, reorienting or online campaigns, for example, and so on. But I find particularly very key and very adequate two of them. One is the building partnership with academic actors. Our world is managed by people who have passed through higher education institutions. They are medical doctors, they are lawyers, many of them are bankers, they are heads of states, of governments, they are those in parliaments and who make the rules for the rest. We have 7.7 billion human beings in the world. Those who have gone to school and come out with certificates are those who cause the most trouble. Reason, how do we engage them in terms of building a partnership around ethics? If teachers in institutions will teach their students the right things to do, not just knowledge, but also transmitting a certain form of values, character, personality, integrity, we would have a better world. Because I cannot be a graduate of a banking industry and I do fraud in the bank. I cannot be a student of governance in a university, political science, and I do election rigging. I cannot be an engineer who knows and I just manufacture things that kill people and sell fake drugs. So the issue about civil society, building partnership with academic actors is for me singularly very particular. And this is what I do at Globe Ethics. I just want to summarize it by saying, if we transmit education, values-based education into the work of CSOs to engage academic actors in higher education institutions, also in the lower ones, we would have ethics go into empowerment of the youth. They are the majority of those in the world. It will go into transforming societies from inside, not just the buzzword, but the reality of transformation. It will go into integrity. When I speak, then I speak with integrity, with honor. It's not just about talking. It's about looking at the face and looking at what we do. It goes into the holistic approach Thomas, what you call comprehensive method of inclusion. The holistic approach brings in everything. It goes into competence, who can do what, and not who has what color and who has what background. And it goes also into sustainability, which keys into the SDGs. And this is ethics. This is what the acronym for ethics stands for. So I will pick that one, building partnerships among the 12. And I will pick also bridging gaps between global goals and local actors. The sentence is think globally, act locally. So this will be my contribution for this round. Thank you. Yes,
thank you, Obior. That's very important points and close to my heart. The link to the academic world, you know, it makes me think of Greta Thunberg's statement, we stand behind the science, but then it's good to also know the science, and that means knowing the scientists and to work together more closely. That would be great. Yeah, that would be really great. May I now pass on to David, please? David, what's your take on these? You've been one of the main contributors to the development of this first draft list, but what are your reflections now looking back?
Well, as you know, Thomas, we've just completed the four session series in Canada of what will happen in Canada, what we think will happen in Canada. For those that don't know me, my field is strategic foresight. The worst things that have ever happened to me in my life happened to me because I didn't look ahead enough. There are no experts on the future. We got billions of experts right now. In fact, everybody that's on the internet is an expert. So that's fine, except they don't know what's going to happen in the future. So they're not experts if they're thinking about the future and transformation and action that's going to come. So I would like to see more attention paid to looking ahead at what the context might be for all these very fine initiatives. A plan, a strategy is only as good as the context it is carried out in. And most of the problems we face today are as bad as they are because we haven't done foresight. We haven't looked ahead. We haven't sat down together, a diverse group of people with different opinions, different interests, different backgrounds, different learning experiences, and talked about what change might bring 2 years, 5 years, 10 years out in the future. And I raise this because ever since the Millennium Development Goals, I was always a little bit nervous because they were looking ahead and the Millennium Development Goals seemed to be okay, but they weren't looking at the context that was going to be existing in 2015. And now we have the Sustainable Development Goals. More globally focused, more diverse, more inclusive. 2030. Let's look at what if Donald Trump wins a second term? That takes him into the middle of the decade that we have left to accomplish the Sustainable Development Goals. How will that affect our efforts in those 12 issues? I don't know, but I think we should discuss how they might affect the efforts. Very famous futurist, foresight practitioner, who was a very important person in Royal Dutch Shell, said that we should get the discussion off what might happen to what we would do if it did happen. So, as has been mentioned already, gaps, change, partnerships, but in what context? So, as I've made the point, the World Academy a number of times, I think one of the standing committees in the bylaws should focus more on strategic foresight activities. In many ways, that's what we're doing today.
Exactly.
Thanks,
Yes.
Tom.
Yeah. Thank you, David. Yeah, that's very true. I agree with you. It's, you know, we have to exercise our faculty of active imagination, as Henry Corbin called it, and actually posit ourselves in the future and work towards a shared vision of that future that we all can be comfortable with. I'll pass on now to Hong Mei Lee. Hong is a student leader, and we're very happy to have a student voice. What was your take on those strategies, looking at them? And also, I think we're already into the second question, kind of, you know, if there's any you would reconceptualize like David just did. I think we can conflate the two questions in a way. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, thank you so much for the invitation. I'm sharing this from a personal story. I think the first strategy that is most important, and I think all of them are really valuable, but similar to Dr. Eek and many of you share, is bridging the gap between global goals and local action through partnerships and local and global CSAs. That's really critical because often we say think global and act local. So specifically, I'm giving an example of Art of Living Foundation as a volunteer, and also International Association for Human Value of their youth movement. They taking the goals local, think globally and also act locally. So I know for the Art of Living Foundation, there's many projects. They have projects in India on sustainability, water sanitation, building toilets, teaching breath water sound for trauma release, both in India as well as in US, during Katrina. Currently in US, during COVID-19, we have the Blacks riot movement and also the healthcare. We are addressing the mental wellness, and as an important civic leaders, that's the most critical part of the service project. From a personal perspective, I came to this space when I was doing my PhD in chemistry back in the days, and it was really taking a toll on my physical being. I was working full time and also in graduate school and taking care of my disabled parents. So how do I take care of that when there's so much demand, and physically ending up in the hospital with a kidney infection for a week? And I was like, well, I need to do something about it. So I noticed that once I stumbled upon this, with a colleague who's studying MD PhD in neuroscience, is like, well, you know, this can help increase the productivity. And I was like, okay, yes, this is what I want. I need to be more productive coming from a student perspective. But then it actually becoming more than that. It become building relationships with not only with my own personal relationship, but also partnership that enable me to do at work. Specifically, I became a project manager at University of Pennsylvania. I built partnership with like Mexico National Institute of Health, as well as Costa Rica's ambassador. So I noticed that all these relationships I embrace and diversity I embrace is do it because I feel the social connection within myself, and also then I'm able to have more empowerment to share as a leader. How can I better the other people around the world? So with that being in mind, then all the other strategy can be optimized. Example, diversity, be able to be more sensitive with other, be able to understand what are the different background they're coming from, and be able to make a decision. Because when you're stressed and you have all these things going on, you'll not be able to make a democratic decision and building trust. Because once you trust yourself, you can be able to have trust with other. And definitely in academia, that's all across the sectors. How do you build collaboration? And going back to green coalition and economic empowerment, that's all collaborated. So I think first I would start local, which is yourself, then think global and how can you empower the world, and also the movement of the political movement as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's a very important point. It's very important at this moment in time that civil society actors look up and notice all the others who are working in the same or similar fields, and to not look at them as competitors, but as allies. and as people moving in the same direction and to join forces. That's very important. Ash, finally, Ash Bachuri, please, what is your take on this? You must unmute yourself first, Ash.
Yes. I wanted to say thank you very much. I'm honored to be here. And I would also say, I think that these are very comprehensive. I think the 12 strategies. However, as I reflect on them and I relate to them in terms of a lot of the work that we've been engaged with and I've personally been involved with across the field of development, you know, the climate, youth climate movement, and also a lot of community movements in terms of health and health access. I would say I also relate, like a lot of the other speakers and panelists prior to me, though the issue of bridging gaps between global goals and local action through partnerships is one that I would underscore. And the reason I would want to do this is I think that this one in particular embraces a very, very important element where we have a lot of young people from different places and different spheres. And as we start to think about youth really taking, engaging in meaningful action and being involved in global decision-making and playing a part in terms of making the changes that we're talking about and we're all, that bring us all together over here, is really important for young people from different spaces, including those that often, even in our inclusive, like the Black Lives Matter current sort of movement that we're witnessing, oftentimes the inclusive approaches actually end up being exclusive because we still leave people out. So I think I think I relate a lot to this one because we do want voices from the ground. And I know you also talk about amplifying voices, particularly in the one that you talk about, you know, exemplary action being magnified using media and so on. So I think they're all very interconnected, but it's really important to understand that there are young people and there are communities that often get left out, but they're actually leading change on the ground. It's just that we need spaces where they're able to meaningfully engage, not tokenistically, but and also be able to build partnerships at global level, where they not only are able to affect change in terms of global decision making, but and also representing peers, but also being able to demonstrate and amplify that change. And I've seen this in the field as I've done a lot of work, that it makes a very big difference, and it really does transform and strengthen leadership. So like I said before, I think that they're really important, and it is indeed a very comprehensive way of looking at it, but there are some that I think stand out, and it's mostly the one that I mentioned, which is that we need more voices from the ground to be amplified and connected with global partnerships and be able to engage in terms of affecting change through decision making beyond tokenistic engagement. Yes, thank you.
I completely agree. In fact, my own research in Indonesia is with farmers who are activists for sustainability, and they have an organization of 1.5 million people and doing fantastic work, but nobody knows about it, or nobody would know about it if they hadn't in the last few years gone into a partnership with La Via Campesina. And now they're going all over Southeast Asia, training other farmers in their innovative methods, which is fantastic. It just illustrates the potential of bringing those silent heroes at the local level into a more global, audience. Okay, we have to be mindful of the time, so I'm going to go to question 4, and Ash has already started. But back to you, Mariana. How do you see the role of youth in civil society? That's something I definitely want to dwell on for a moment.
From my political experience perspective, I must confess that young people are not quite often included. They are situated at the backstage as a necessary facade, as a good community to be addressed to, but they are not really participating in the decision-making process. And we have to stop this kind of hypocrisy because it doesn't work like that. In political context, politicians always refer to young people when they need to vanish their image. And I believe the same holds true in other perspectives. I think that we might suggest some kind of alternative approach. You know, when opposite parties here in Bulgaria want to gain some advantages, they offer an alternative government or the so-called government in shadow. So we could suggest a board of organization of young people to be alternative or even a partner of such kind of global governance fund. And we could start this initiative as a next step of our common efforts here.
That's a fantastic idea. Thank you. You know, like having a youth shadow government of the world. Is that right? Is that, yeah?
Not shadow, okay. But alternative or fresh or...
Yeah, at various levels, perhaps. Yes, yes, at various levels, yeah. Okay, and Obiora, I'm sorry I have to rush a little bit because of, we want to have time for the participants.
Thank you very much. We look at the comprehensivity of all these, what you might call all these goals. I think each of them plays a role. But I'm looking at our youth, and I'm looking at large potentials of young people around the world sleeping and snoring, not interested in what affects their lives. And yet, it is these youth that we use for all the troubles in the world. There are those who are in the army, killed in war fronts, dying for what they do not know about, fighting other people's wars. There are those who don't go to school. It is these youth, for example, who suffer all the illnesses in the world. Tell me one youth leader in any political game, in any nation, very young, who's managing the affairs of the world. And yet we have old people, gerontocrats, running governments when they should retire and allow their young people to, that's transgenerational. I'm looking at the social contract. The social contract said we need, as human beings, to hand over our individual liberties and sovereignties to a government. The state will manage our affairs, and we did. So the youth played their role, society played their role. But what happened? Governments hijack the power, they lock you up, they make the laws that fit them, and they carry you into war. They do not progress your good, and they mislead you. They even cause wars that destroy nations. They build nuclear bombs, which we do not need. So this is where the role of CSOs, civil society organizations, comes in. But civil society organizations and youth cannot perform without values. And it is this ethical value. It's not just about taking power. It's not even about adding. It is about a value addition. And the value addition are around those things we have tried to say. We want transformation for the quality of the human person. The human person is central. It's not a tool. It is a being, a subject. It's not to be used. It's not a utility. The human being is at the center of development. This is where civil society organizations must key in. But the media is a disgrace in many times and in many places. The media is manipulative. The media is even working for the corporates and working, for example, just to blow those who pay them. So we must be in a way to take back power. And you can only take back power by knowledge. Youth go to school. Youth learn something. Youth stand for something. Youth be empowered with transformation, ethical ingredients, and value. If you don't stand for something, you will not die for anything. So we need to stand for something. We need to stand for goodness. We need to say it and not be afraid of anything. And this is where I think the youth need to be challenged. And civil society organizations are best placed to challenge the youth. And we need civil societies because governments have failed. So we have now non-governmental organizations to complement the failures of government. And that non-governmental organization, they need a place, they need a scope they need finances, they also need media, they need partnerships, but above all, they need ethical ingredients of education that put them above governments. I cannot change and become the same. I must transform for the better, and the better is the good life. And that good life is what World Academy of Arts and Science, what globeethics.net in Geneva is trying to do. Use your knowledge, because that's what makes you different from an animal. Rationality. Why must I do right, different from wrong? And not political, financial, money, egoistic, greedy. Everybody has 6 feet under the earth. You just die, they bury you. And that's all. You have only a short time on this world. So why can't I change? Youth of the world, wake up, sit up, stop snoring and sleeping and doing nothing and looking only on the, take power and go into politics and go and vote when it is time to vote.
Yes.
That would be
Okay, thank you, Bjorn. And David, what is your take on the role of youth, or where do you see youth?
As some of you might know, when this working group started, I advocated for changing the title to Youth and Civil Society, putting youth first. I still feel very strongly about this because, in part, it's a foresight thing. Whether we like it or not, whether we believe in it or not, in the future, today's youth will be the leaders. So they must start preparing now. They must be given the facilities and the right to begin preparing now. And that's the reason I have advocated for years moving away from the term leadership to leadingship. Any organization that doesn't make every member of the organization eligible to suggest a change, to suggest an improvement, to suggest something is wasting leading. Every one of us, every single one of us at some point in time can lead. And as has just been pointed out, governments haven't done a very good job lately. I recall, you remember 10 years ago, if somebody said to you BRICS, Brazil, Russia, China, India, and South Africa, everybody would smile and say, ah, yeah, the future of the world. And now look at the BRICS. They're all BRICS, B-R-I-C-K-S. They're all having massive problems. We could have foreseen that. The youth in those countries is having a very difficult time. But those youth will be the leaders of those countries in 10, 12, 15, 18, 20 years. So this brings me to the number 3, gaps between global goals and local action. I think, again, gaps between local action and global goals. The globe will remain a patchwork. But local action is where it's going to be at. And I think you've all mentioned that in each in your own ways. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay, but now to our 2 youth voices, Hong Mei Lee and Ashpat Chowdhury. Hong Mei, would you like to begin and give us a youth perspective on youth?
Thank you so much. I think many of you already answered part of my answer, so I'll just keep it brief and short. I see youth as the catalyst, as a chemist perspective, for social change. So they are really like the mechanism beyond making the next level. But then what really prevents them is a kind of what Dr. Ik says, like they are sleeping, right? They're stressed, they have so much going on. Specifically in universities, many of them are having mental illness, such as like, oh, suicidal thought because my grade's not doing well, or whatever peer pressure that they're having, right? So then what are the solutions I can see this as? I see the programs that I volunteer for, the Sky Campus Happiness Program in university setting, teaches the breathing technique and service orientation and leadership to be able to think just not about what's happening with me, just the small gray things that's happening, but really a broader perspective globally what's happening. So kind of go back what Dr. Harris saying earlier, think global and still act local. So going back to the early answer as well, is that not just seeing the small things that's happening right now, it's also what can I do for the world? So when they start doing services, when they're being activating and hearing their voices, and the service project is not like we give to them, it's really what they inspire to do. So doing these programs in Sky Campus Happiness Program and also Sky School, which is from middle like 4 till 18, they're doing these programs where they empower as part of the curriculum to think not just about myself, it's how I can do for the world.
Okay, thank you. Over to you, Ash.
Sure, thank you so much. I would also echo some of the voices we've already heard, and I want to say that in the experience that I have had working with young people in different parts of the world, one of the things that really does make a difference in terms of meaningful youth engagement and leadership is really peer-to-peer programs where we can really affect structural change and have young people working by and for young people. So programs led by young people for young people are really those that are hugely powerful and inspirational. I also want to say some of the approaches do make a difference in terms of the meaningful role of youth in society. And that is really using participatory approaches. So having approaches that have the voices of youth engaged in programs, hopefully by and for youth, make a difference, because those are much more sustainable as we talk about sustainable development goals and sustaining the change that we're talking about. Really, they become owned by the community if the community's voices are engaged in the design of those programs. So I think that really does affect long-lasting change, and it's like the saying about teaching a man to fish and feeding him for a night versus teaching him how to fish. And so I think the important thing is to teach people how to fish, and part of that is engaging youth in the process of designing programs in any case. And I think finally, as we think about youth, the important thing is to think of young people as leaders of today, as certainly leaders of tomorrow, but also leaders of today. And therefore, engaging young people at the level of at school. And I know that Dr. Ikis mentioned this, but it's really important that young people get to practice this, and it's not theoretical, and it's not limited to just a few people, but really if you want to affect change, and like you said, Ms. Hongmei is catalyzing that change, we need to be able to work at scale, and therefore we need to start to think about how to institutionalize this. And I think this was raised even in the course of the first question, but building those values, the integrity, and starting to practice it at school level is critical, and therefore our teachers are also key in this process.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we should now open discussion. We haven't gone through all the questions yet, but I think in one way or another, we've all been able to say what we wanted to, and I'd like to really move to the questions now. The first one is from Shanglok Movahednia, if I hope I pronounce that correctly. And the question is about corporations, multinational corporations, and the fact that so much of the development process, the economic system is in the hands of these corporations. And they have cartels, and they monopolize some of the tools of development. So how can we change that? And makes me think of the opening session yesterday about multilateralism, when there was much lament, and why don't we have a lack of political leaders? And I think part of it is because they're not really very much political leaders, because the political class has been undermined by becoming servile to corporate interests all over the world. So you can't expect them to be very good at solving problems associated with the global commons. But how do you think that the problem of the great power of corporations can be addressed, especially from the civil society end? Mariana, would you like to, or since you have a background in politics, how do you think that can be?
I'm convinced that we should go beyond the typical state systems of capitalism or socialism, and we have to recalibrate the expectation of technology dominance or deitism, which is explained by Yuval Harari. And we have to go beyond it and to try to convert it to some kind of new utopia for the world, new big ideas such as blue planetary environmentalism, collaboration or something like that. But this is just notions, just ideas, and we have to put content in that kind of ideas and to elaborate a kind of action plan, step by step, engage with concrete time frame and measures what to do to get to this not utopia, but new reality. But it's difficult just for 2 or 3 minutes to make very clear statement how to do that. But I believe this could be gathered by systematic approach and holistic thinking, something like World Academy of Art and Sciences already do. No.
More broadly, would anybody else like to, of the panelists, speak on that relationship between the corporate sector and civil society? It's very important. We always address ourselves to politics, but rarely do we,
Yeah, Thomas, I would like to add value to that. Definitely, business is important for society. Business is enterprise. It is the art of making money and of making market and of making products. Some businesses are successful, then they grow and become global players. Some are not, and they remain as small enterprises. We cannot undermine the importance of businesses globally. They serve society. And it is not about envy, it's about the fruit of hard work. If you work hard, you produce. But there must be regulations. Where we have the problem is when corporates become the laws upon themselves, when they are not regulated. When, for example, you make money, you buy a government, you buy a state, you corrupt the system, you corrupt the legal infrastructures, you are not accountable. This is where civil societies must confront such businesses by shaming them, by using the media to expose the bad practices. Explain to me how someone will go to the Niger Delta and drill oil from the earth and drill oil in such a way that the entire environment is polluted and make big money and not even spend a dime to clean up the rubbish. And then people cannot fish, they cannot go to farm, they have no jobs, they die of the bad gas, and you say you're making business and you are making money and you are a global number one. That is not only unethical, it is a clear case of where civil society must engage. But we have governments. What are the governments doing? That is why you need a good government. And a good government is made up of people who have brain, who think with their heads and think with their souls and think with their heart. And they are the types of persons whom when you put in power, you check them also. I don't just give you power and leave you. I give you power and I control how you use the power. This is the power of the youth and of civil societies. And we can pull down governments. It's happened all over the world. So I do think that corporates are important, businesses are necessary, but they must fulfill the regulations and work for the common good. And this is where they need check and balance.
Okay, thank you. I'd just like to add briefly, though, that there are options also for civil society to directly influence the corporations, not just through the political process, but through boycotts and all kinds of actions. Ash, you want to unmute yourself and comment on that? You're still muted. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I was gonna actually flag the point exactly that that there's a lot of power in the consumer and civil society and young people in influencing change, and businesses and their ability to succeed or not is dependent on the consumer. But of course, also we know that I want to build on the point that Dr. Ike mentioned, which is that we talk a lot about governments, but businesses are also very important and powerful, and a lot of governments are dependent upon businesses, and so those groups are very powerful, and business and governments come back over and over sometimes, or come into power because of businesses. So it is a very important stakeholder. It's hard to leave out, and the decision of young people and consumers in the process of helping businesses survive and thrive is critical. So yeah, I was going to actually highlight those points.
We mustn't forget business is also quite heterogeneous. There are those who might pollute the Niger Delta, and that's terrible. And on the other hand, there are also companies that are quite progressive and positive and have good leadership. So I guess there's a big scope, and we must reward those who do the right thing. And there's another question. We need to move on.
Thomas, could I bring something?
Okay.
Could I bring something up here?
Yes, please. Go on.
We are in a situation today where many corporations are bigger than many countries in terms of wealth, in terms of, in some cases, number of people. I think we have to go back to the business about learning. We have to have in schools part of our education system informing, making more aware youth as they go through the school, college, and university system of the situation that exists now, so that they will have a more informed basis to improve things in their future when they're leaders. Right now, a 15-year-old is not going to tell Facebook what to do, or LinkedIn Covat, or General Dynamics. But in 20 years, who knows? That person might have got the background, the experience to be somebody important in that organization. And if he or she knows, is aware of the situation, he or she will be more able to make the changes they feel are necessary or good.
Yes, thank you, David. I was about to hand over to you with a second question, which is about, creating, how can we create the context for our goals to be achievable? And that's from Anne Snake, and she was agreeing with you on the futuring, but education is so vital in shaping that future.
But can we get away from the word education and get to learning?
Okay.
Because when we say education, there's all these structures and big brick buildings and things, where a lot of learning that is very valuable today is experiential or cultural or community or even outdoors. And therefore, I think if we can work on the learning rather than thinking education, because that immediately takes us back inside the school. Thank you.
So taking learning out of the institutions, or finding new spaces and modes of learning is I think that's a very good idea. There's another question from Sarah Garcia. She says, I agree that we need to have a clear vision of the world we want to live and create with the young people. And we need to create an integral education program that develops, or learning program that develops the various dimensions of the person, something that's more values-centered. So the question is, have you got any good practices to share? I think, Obiora, that's really what you do, isn't it? Putting values at the center of learning. Would you like to comment on this question?
Very fast, and thank you very much, Thomas. The thing about values goes from values to ethics, because there are all sorts of values, but we must also value the values. They are just like Friedrich Nietzsche will talk about the devaluation of all values towards bringing out the best values. I mean, there are points of view, But just back, David, concerning education. Educo, educare is about leadership. I mean, it can be misused. Any word can be misused, but we'll have to take it back and use education to train how to learn. The thing about education is that when you bring in ethics into education, you bring empowerment, transformation, integrity, holistic approach, competence, and sustainability. If it goes into the classroom everywhere in the world, we have made it. This is where we want to reach, and that's what we are trying to do at globeethics.net, at the World Academy of Arts and Science, at the Club of Rome, influencing society by bringing in values to transform society. This is our work, and it's just not finished. We are just at the beginning, and this conference teaches us the long way to go. And I must want to commend Ash and Marianne and Hong and David himself, of course, you, Thomas, for giving us this opportunity, because I'm looking at our time running. I just want to see that there is another program that's coming up again at 1 p.m. today, and that will be 1.5 hours. We'll have enough time to continue this conversation. I look forward to it. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you, Obiora. And Obiora will be chairing that second session, and I will be just filling the questions. And there's one question we didn't answer. We're out of time. I just wanted to briefly say, the question was about what should be the top priority for civil society. And if I may use my privilege as a chair to say that I feel that whatever it may be, and there are different takes on that, it's got to involve mobilization, because we have to remember that civil society organizations are just a small part of civil society at large, and the larger part is still not active and not on the streets and not organized. And that's the real overwhelming challenge, to really mobilize more people to get involved, to reach out into the communities at all levels. Okay, well, I hope to you, to all the participants, I hope you will join us again at 1 o'clock. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much.